Hey family, how you doing? This your brother Vitamin D's. Peace to you, peace to your home, peace to your family, peace to your community, peace to your ancestry, peace to my community, peace to my ancestry, peace to the nation that you, I, and they are building. Peace also to the Goddic forces, great spirit above, mother below. How y'all doing? So, parallel universes. I mentioned in another video that I've been slowly getting into parallel universes recently. And I was left a very good comment on a video that I posted. And I wanted to talk a little bit about parallel universes and some of the things that I believe are happening with this concept of parallel universes that should be important to us. And then, well, I'm going to start off though with talking about this idea that the elite have dramatically advanced technology. I believe absolutely the elite have access to some advanced technologies. I do not believe that they have mastered time travel yet. I do not believe that they have mastered dimensional traveling yet or wormhole creation. I think they're close with wormholes, but I do not believe they've learned to travel dimensionally yet. And I do not believe that they have learned to open up the portals of the planet yet. I believe they're moving in those directions, but I don't believe they're there yet. And the reason I don't believe they're there yet, mostly intuition. Mostly intuition. And also, well, I'll just leave it at intuition. But for Black folks, when we're thinking about this world and parallel universes and things like that, one, we have to realize, okay, the ancestral realm, or the ancestral realm is a parallel universe. It is of a higher vibratory frequency than this place that we are living at here now. When we talk about heaven, we are talking about a higher vibrational frequency. When the chariot comes down to take us home, that chariot is like rain. It actually has to condense in order to appear and to carry us home. Now, it's interesting. I had a very interesting experience with the chariot, and I wasn't going home. When one day, well, obviously one day, but way back when I was a teenager, my father passed away. I was there when my father passed away. The whole morning I was there. It was a beautiful sunny day. And then about an hour before he passed, it looked like it was going to rain. Thick, heavy, gray clouds covered the sky. My father was fine. He decided to go to the store on his bike, went to the store on his bike, came back, was breathing weirdly, threw his bag down, collapsed onto the couch, rolled his head back, and took his last breath. Died of a massive heart attack. My mother told me that she knew he died because she heard the death gurgle. He died. I saw those clouds, and those clouds were there all day, all night, until the next morning. Well, almost all night, but until the next morning, woke up, the sun was out beautifully. Fast forward a couple of years, I leave for school. My mom had been sick. She had been home, and she had been sick. I leave for school. Not as beautiful. My dad died in the summer. My mom died in the winter. But it was still a sunny day. Beautiful day at that. I walked to school. I'm feeling good. I'm enjoying myself. I looked out the window. I was leaving school early that day. I looked out the window, and I'll never forget it. Overcast. Those thick clouds again. I walk home. The house is really eerily quiet. I make some noise trying to stir my mom because something inside of me said, it's too quiet. This is too quiet. My mom didn't stir. I went and shook her a little bit. She was heavy. I knew that wasn't right. Shook her again. She opened her eyes, and I could clearly see no pupils. She was dying. Called the ambulance. She died before she even got out of the town. Later on, I met the paramedic who actually, he remembered me, which was weird because this was like 10 years later. He remembered me. And he told me, he goes, nah, before we even exited the community, she was gone. So she was in the process of dying. My sister, I went up, she was staying with us at the time. She was older. And I knocked on the door, and she said that she was having a dream that she walked downstairs in our house. And there was this huge group of people there surrounding my mom's bedroom. And my sister said she went into the front door. She had to go through this huge crowd of people first. And she went in to my mom's room. And my dad was sitting on her bed holding her hand. And he looked up and he said, I'm going to take her. And that's when I came knocking on her door and woke her up. Now, I don't know why they wanted me to tell you this story. But I know why I wanted to tell them. But they were like, yeah, you got to tell this story. I know a reason. But the chariot came down and took her. And those clouds didn't lift for a long time. And I know why they didn't lift for a long time. I was massively depressed after my mom died. I looked at it as I couldn't save her. I'm somewhat of a healer. I've always been kind of a healer. And I was trying to save my mom, do what I could do. I was young. I didn't understand that sometimes it's the will of the Most High. So, I denounced that there was no God that night after we came back from the hospital. I went walking. We had a German Shepherd, and I went walking our German Shepherd. And she was very protective of me and very skittish of strangers. On my way back to the house, though, a man in a black jacket stopped me. And he was coming from our neighbors. And he said, I was just at your neighbor's selling refrigerators. And he told me that your mother had passed away. So, I'm not going to come in there, obviously, and give you guys a pitch. And I'm like, yeah. And I believe the guy was white. He wasn't black. But he said, I don't know if you would mind, but can I pray with you? And I said, yeah, definitely. You could pray with me. Absolutely. Whatever. So he did. And I remember this energy coming through me. And I said thank you to him. And, I told him to have a good night. And I went in the house, let the dog off the leash. And I thought about something that I wanted to ask him about or something. It's 20 years now. I forgot why. But like less than a minute after I had just been with him, I ran back outside to talk to him about something. And I think it was about the neighbors, because I think I remembered that I was like, wait a minute, the neighbors ain't even home. Like, who the heck was he talking to? So I ran out to catch him, to ask him. And we lived right next to a hill. And you could see, if you went up just a couple of steps, you could see down one road and down the other road. And you could see clearly. There were no other houses that he could have went into to talk to people on. And it was late at night. It was dark 30. It was March, so it was dark at that time. So I ran up to, catch the dude. He was nowhere to be seen. Nowhere to be seen. I ran up to, the crossroads there, and I looked both ways. Nowhere to be seen. Nowhere. I was a little bit shocked. I went inside trying to figure out, like, what the heck, what did... Now, I was depressed, because of my mom, but I'm like, man, maybe I'm just going crazy. But it was years later that I realized I call him an angel. But what he was he had been dispatched from the chariot. Because, and I don't know how many of you have been through something like this. You get to a moment where things seem to be unfolding for you and going pretty well. You're on track to do something. And suddenly something happens. Pulls you down. And immediately you get swarmed by, I'm going to call them demons because that's the best thing that I can come up with right now. But you get swarmed by these entities that are trying to keep you from moving forward. My mother's death, even though my father had orchestrated it, my mother's long slide towards that death had been one increasingly rampant attack by these things after another. And my mother had held on for as long as she could, but in the final months of her being alive, the house had just deteriorated into turmoil. With me often being the one getting the short end of the stick. My father took my mom out of that situation, and I understand he took her out because there was nothing she could do. There was no amount of praying to Jesus that was going to help us, unless she was willing to change her spiritual philosophy, which she was too weak to do. It was just going to compound things. When you bring that thing into your home, oftentimes what it does is it does not pull you together. It splits you and fragments you apart. This is why the only Jesus, or even if you gotta say Jesus, that I would encourage you to have in your home is if that mofo is black. That's it. The other one is a fragmenter. He is a pretender. He is all the things that you were told that you should be watching out for the devil. So my father took her away for that reason. But the ultimate goal, and I realized this years later, wasn't about her. It was about me. Now, that dispatcher who had come through had given me some extra strength to make it through what I had to go through over the next year and a half. Because I'm going to tell you what, the next year and a half was rough. It was rough. But I was able to move through it because of that extra energy. Now, this is important. This is important because they don't even want me talking about that. Okay, so give me 1 second. All right, so I'm back. Um, this is important that, you realize this because, the dimensions that we are talking about overlay one another. They overlay one another. And depending on the acceleration of the soul, or the acceleration that the soul needs to get to the dimension where they originated from, and how prepared they are internally, the energy, the air, can actually condense and change consistency in order to allow that soul to get back to that dimension. When we talk about the ancestral realm, ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about a far off place. We're talking about a dimension that is within our grasp. However, and this is important, we are looking at it often as one dimension. The ancestral realm is multiple dimensions. That's what we forget. They're multiple dimensions. That's what they are. Now, there's even, to show you how smart these people are, there are intermediate dimensions, including one which I often refer to as the ethereal realm. That is a complete intermediate dimension. That is a dimension of transport. When some of the scenery discussed in Egypt, when they talk about the Duat, that is kind of they're talking in many instances of the intermediate, not always, but often. And some of that is not when they talk about going down, oftentimes they're talking about literally going within. Some of it is about going down, but that's a whole nother hollow earth type of deal. And it's so funny. I used to be absolutely against that idea, and now I believe it is true. In fact, I know it's true. But that's for another day. The ancestral realm is always within our grasp. It is always within our fingertips, or the grasp of our fingertips, and we don't even recognize it. We don't even recognize it. How does this all kind of relate to the wealthy and what the wealthy are doing? Well, first things first, I want to clear up one big misunderstanding about how we view the planet and how we view it in terms of the Matrix, because this is massively important. Francis Chris Walsing taught us how to look between the lines of what white people tell us and how they act. And most of us have forgotten that. Francis Chris Walsing also told us that when white people tell us about themselves, listen to them. She also taught us how to look at the stories that white people tell as psychological fodder from their mind. Okay? The Kogi tell us that little brother was born amongst them. Kogi, by the way, are from South America. And remember what they said about South America. South America and Africa used to be linked. And if you look at these people are red skin, deep copper red skinned black folks with long hair. Kogi. Some of them are a little lighter skinned, but most of them are just like that. The Kogi said the white man was created or was born among us. Now I know This is going to go against the Nation of Islam concept and one other concept that I talked to you about before, but you got to understand there's multiple strands here. Kaji said these people, the white man, the little brother as they call him, was born amongst us and immediately showed an ambivalence towards Mother Earth. He immediately showed an ambivalence and a hostility towards Mother Earth. We tried to teach him to make him realize that Mother Earth is sacred, that she is to be cherished, that she is supposed to be loved. However, he showed that he was unwilling to learn. There were a few that did learn. So, it was decided by the elders to send him far, far away. We interpret that as sent to Europe, where they would learn to love Mother Earth and learn to take care of her and to honor her and to treat her as sacred. They were placed in a boat with elders who would teach them while they were there. And they left. And they went to that far, far place across the oceans, the waters. The Kaji continued by saying, we knew that when they returned to us, that they would be ready to live in harmony with everybody else. The Hopi say that we were told when we arose to the top of, or to the surface of the planet, from deep within the planet, there were ant people who brought them to the top of the planet. We were told by them that the Europeans, we would meet the Europeans. They didn't call them the Europeans. There were actually other terms that they used. And when we met them, they would give us one of two signals. And whichever signal they gave us, if they shook our hands in a certain way, they would treat us like we were brothers. If they did not, then we would be going into a period of hardship. When Europeans met the Hopis, they gave them a trinket. The Hopis then went back and spread the word throughout their vast network. These people, the Hopi, were connected to every tribe on the face of this continent, north and south, and said to them, it's going to be a hard time. It's going to be a hard time. And it was. We need to start realizing something, family. We have identified so much with white people that we don't look at them as a separate entity anymore. We think what they say applies to us. We think what they say applies to us. It doesn't. And white people know it. White people know it. They understand it. They get it. We think because they say in their movies that the Matrix is horrible. It's trapping us. It's keeping us down here. We are all just prisoners here. That applies to us. It doesn't. It doesn't. The majority of you, especially those listening to this video, most of you ain't trapped here. You ain't even close to being trapped here. Not even a bit. No. This place was created. It appears that this place was created. And Phil Valentine kind of hit on this. I can't even think of the name of the lecture, but he talked about creating, I forgot how he talked about it, but he was talking about one group of beings on one level creating a lower world. And so that's what this appears to be. That this world seems to be the place the Kogi were talking about when they said, we sent them across the seas. We sent them across the seas so they could learn how to be one with nature and to treat it as sacred. This seems to be part of that punishment. I guess a punishment wouldn't be right, but this seems to be part of that project to get them to appreciate the mother and to do right by her. We are supposed to be there. We are supposed to be there to help them. Now, something happened. And what I believe happened was a couple of things. One, when they were sent here, they were not the only strands sent here. There were synthetic strands. They were those who had been created interuterine. So they were actually created and placed in the belly and birthed. Yeah, man, that whole interuteral thing, they were showing me exactly what they were talking about. And that's why I was trying to explain it, because I'm like, wow, these scientists went all out. They were trying to really create this new form. And it wasn't just about making the physical form. They also made the spiritual DNA for it, or what we would call spiritual DNA, but it was synthetic. And it was sperm. And they literally, so that they could connect it to the well springs, the life springs that are at the center of this galaxy and the center of the universe. The ideas that these folks have for this universe is interesting, but they had to, in order to do that, you have to have that spiritual genetic code that makes it possible to draw from both of those areas, and they did that, and that was how they did the interuterine thing. Anyway. They were successful in it. They were very successful in it. And so what happened when they were here is some of them mated with the synthetics. And I'm still, the way I've always seen it was that when the Ice Age hit, the last one that was here, and a lot of them got trapped behind there, and there was so much more to the Ice Age than what we realize. I mean, you're talking about dimensional portals getting sealed off. You're talking about exchanges that expanded the continents, that we think of mythical places as being unreal. Those places were real, most of them. And it was because if you knew where to walk, you could go from this dimension to the other. While the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, stopped all that. And that was deliberate. That was deliberate because they had to contain this. It appeared almost to be a virus. And they wanted to see if there was anything that could save it. So during the Ice Age, you had elders who were teaching these groups of people to live harmoniously, splinter and fragment, and devolve into sectarianism. You also had elders who were killed by the people who they were supposed to be teaching, because the people thought that they were leading them incorrectly. And I explained in another video how you had a hunter class, and actually I may have not explained it in another video, but all ancient, what they call primitive societies, always had a hunter class and a warrior class. And in those hunter classes would go out and get the food for the rest of the tribe. Now, it is clear that there was a power struggle with the hunter class and the elders, and the elders lost. The elders lost. And when the ice retreated, the culture that came out, which was supposed to be a lot more spiritual, which was supposed to be a lot more communal, which was supposed to be able to solve their differences without bloodshed, without getting crazy or anything like that, that wasn't what was apparent when the ice rolled back. And what we had then was a number of groups on this side of the dimensional fence, and on the other side of the dimensional fence, there were lands that were appropriated on the, what we call the other side, the neutral side, to also develop these folks. And it didn't take. They were more barbarous because of having interwoven their genetic strands with the Neanderthals. And there was another group that they combined their energies with, and it changed them. It changed them. Now, that's what happened with Rome, because on it's a lower ancestral realm, but it's still in the upper ancestral area. There is a Romanesque dimension, which would look very familiar to people who love Rome and Greece. It's there. It's beautiful. It's big, huge, bigger than all of Asia and Europe and Africa put together. It's gorgeous. Same thing with Japanese culture and Japanese. Asian culture. I guess I'll just say that. Same with that. But particularly the Japanese and the Mongolians, they have another space up there too. They too are synthetics, but they are synthetics from another world that's like connected to Ethiopia, not Egypt. Not Egypt. The synthetic European comes from Siberia in the Caucasus Mountains. The synthetic Asian comes from Tibet and India. But these people came out compromised, and there was a discussion that was had amongst the elders of what we should do with those folks, what we should do with those who were left over, when it was very clear that they were not heading in the pathway that they should. Well, the movie The Adjustment Bureau tells you what was figured out. Sent ambassadors to them to teach them. Now, here's the interesting part is, in the upper realms, a number of the synthetic white and some black, but mostly white synthetics are used as slaves. They're dispatched all over. And they're basically advanced machines. You know, they're not technically, they do not have a will force to enable them to direct destiny and mission, which is what would separate them from being a machine and a soul in development. Now, every slave has the opportunity to go through the process of having that will force embedded in them. And they get times and opportunities to change according to specific planetary alignments and when they were created. So some of those who had wanted souls, who wanted to make that transition, who wanted to make that transgender, you go from a synthetic gender to a spiritual gender. They were then dispatched to the planet to work with the Europeans, some of them, if they were advanced enough. And then others were dispatched to grow and learn with the Europeans. And then some were dispatched to Africa and other places. All with an eye on creating a situation where those who had walked away from the original path, that includes Europe, that includes Asia, that they could be reintegrated into the mass of humanity. It didn't work as well as they had hoped. It didn't. And the last great shot at making it work came with the Moors. The Moors were literally the last hope to try to get these people to do what was right. And the Moors laid everything at their feet to get them ready. And that synthetic, that Neanderthal DNA seems to be just too tough, too strong. They won't break those habits. So now, where we're at today, Bobby Hemmett talked about them on Jekyll Island, being given another 100 years to get their minds right. Okay, if I remember correctly, Jekyll Island happened, I think, in 1913. Don't quote me on that, but it was in the middle of the 19-teens. Actually, let me look that up. 1 second. All right, so I looked it up, and I was off by a few years. It was 1910. Now, that's okay, because they had 100 years to get their minds right. See where I'm going with this? That 100 years is done. Now, I've heard that they have, the wealthy have, through complete accident, been in contact with another life form outside of these dimensional walls and outside of the containment of this entire sphere. Now, when we think of sphere, we think of planet. Okay? Well, I want you to think of planet as two words, plan and net. The net portion being very important because this planet, this Earth, which we call it, sits in the middle of a sea of other planes. It sits in the middle of a sea of other planes. And this entire sea of other planes with Earth is the actual plan net. It's the plane net. Okay? That's the entirety of the planet. Where we live right now, this is just one plane. So the entire sphere is all of those other worlds which interact with this one. This is why space is as far as it is. Because in reality, you're going through a lot of other planes. That's just a fact. You're going through other planes. Now, I've heard that they've been in contact with other entities that are not from this sphere, and that is possibly who's giving them aid in their desire to escape from here, because there is going to come a day of reckoning. Though the goal of this planet, ladies and gentlemen, there are 4 incarnations of this planet. 4. And I didn't know this before. I thought there was only this one. But there's 4 incarnations of this planet. And 2 of them are larger. 1 of them is slightly smaller. But all of them basically have the same map. With different countries, mostly. Slightly different histories. Okay, significantly different histories. And all with the same destiny, which is to elevate the vibrational frequency of the people who are there, of the groups who have been placed there, and enable those frequencies to overlap and thus interlock all of these different planets, creating one huge, gigantic new plane, which then could be utilized in the formation of... That is funny. In the formation of... Give me one second. Okay, so all of them elevating up and forming a new planet that would really be in alignment with the ancestral realm, which the Bible actually talks about this. The metaphysical, especially in the metaphysical book, the book of Revelations. You know, I tell all my friends, if you want to skip all of the nonsense of most of the Bible and just go straight to the book of Revelation, you get a lot from it if you just look at it from the standpoint of metaphysics. When they talk about the new heaven and new earth, they're talking about an elevated dimensional frequency that we could have access to, but we don't because of all of the violence and stuff that's going on. Now, in the 60s, the planet was starting to make that ascent. It was starting to move upward and gather steam. The problem with that is, and this is actually part of what's going on with COVID-19. A lot of the white people who were alive at that time couldn't make the ascension. This is why they started voting en masse to destroy the Black Power movement, because that was a spiritual calling of energy onto this realm to start pulling it up. This is why they went after the Native Americans, because they were doing the same thing. This is why they went after the Vietnamese, because in Vietnam, there was an order of monks, of Hindu monks, that understood what was happening, and they were actually working to elevate the vibrational frequency of not only Vietnam, but Asia in general. They were working with this secret order of monks. This is why right now China is going after specific spiritual groups that are doing these ancient practices, because in order for somebody like Xi to stay in charge, in order for China to remain an authoritarian society which allows for Xi and other people like him to run it, the vibrational frequency of the country has to remain very low. And these people are doing things that elevate the vibrational frequency of the country. The same thing is happening with those white people. And I would encourage any white person who sees this video, get into I'm going to call it Celticism, but get into the Celtic religion, because that is you guys, that's your actual, that's your spiritual practice. That's your actual spiritual practice. So you want to get down with that. You want to do that. Yes, I know black people, blacks were Celts, Celts were black. Yes, but that is the bequeathment to white people. That was supposed to be the charge that they had that moved them forward. Okay? So this is why we are seeing what we are seeing. The Vietnam War was a spiritual war. Black people, quick note on World War II, black people, when we went around the world to help fight that war, which was also spiritual, you know about the occult history of the Nazis. Well, we picked up spiritual archetypes from all over the planet and brought them back home and embedded them in our society. And that sparked us. That started waking us up. That started waking us up. And as they said, the game was changed. We said, no way, no how. We're waking up and we're getting this. We started understanding what our real purpose was. These people right now, they know what your purpose is. They understand what your purpose is. They understand that you are literally the walking key. You are the walking ankh. If you become activated, the world becomes activated. Why? Why? Because you become activated, you plug into the circuitry of the planet, and the circuitry of the planet then plugs into everybody else according to your whims, according to what you tell it to do, and then it ignites them. COVID-19 is prepping this planet for elevation. We don't have the mentality necessary to take the planet to elevation yet, because we are still thinking in terms of we need the elite. We need to now move our minds forward and realize that we have always had the vision to transform this society, to recreate this society. The new heaven and earth resides in us, and they know it. That's why they have spent so much time degrading how we see the new heaven and earth, because the new heaven and earth is within us. We are walking new heavens and earths. And you're going to see this increasingly evident with the coming generation. It's likely we have 2 more years of this COVID-19 thing, and it won't be as bad as I think some people are making it out to be after the first year. But the elevation is imminent. This is prepping the ground. Now, will we be willing to do the work necessary to get us there? I don't know. I started off talking about, and I think I do need to continue talking about, the wealthy being down here with us. These people are trapped. We are not. They are trapped only because they choose to be trapped. They refuse to reform themselves. So they are being isolated. And if the planet, I was listening to an economist talk a couple of years back named Mark Blythe, and he said something very interesting. I didn't think was spiritual at all, but I was like, yeah, that's true. He said that the baby boomer generation is willing to spend whatever it can to stave off death, and they will spend it to their last breath. And I was like, yeah, that seems about right. Yeah, absolutely. But then the question occurred to me, why the hell would you do that? If you're going home, why would you spend all this money to keep yourself alive? This planet ain't nothing special. I mean, I like it, but I ain't spending myself into the ground to stay here. And then I realized something. I was watching South Park. In South Park, I think it was 2 seasons ago, maybe 3 now, they had a storyline where there were Man Bear Pig turned out to be true. Man Bear Pig was a thing created by South Park creators to mock Al Gore in his belief that the planet was warming. And the planet is warming. It has a fever. It's about to start kicking ass and taking names. But they discovered Man Bear Pig was real. And they discovered, as they were going about researching what Man Bear Pig was one, that Man Bear Pig was a demon that was sent to Earth to make an exchange. And then 2, that Man Bear Pig had made that exchange with the elderly when they were young. Yeah, like South Park has, if you haven't watched South Park in a while, go back to like 2015 and forward and start watching South Park. Maybe even 2014. But start watching South Park. They have revealed a lot. Anyway, so Man Bear Pig was a demon who came to South Park, Earth, South Park, Southern Globe. Anyway, who came to Earth to make an exchange with the baby boomers. For, I forgot what they got. They got like ice cream and cars. The demon said, well, sometime in the future I'll be back and I'm going to, wreak horrible havoc. And Kyle's grandfather, who had been there when that had happened, said, yeah, we did that. We did that. And we thought we'd all be dead by the time he came for his pound of flesh. So what the hell did we care? Well, they weren't dead. And here it is. My point is, I'm thinking that a lot of these people know that they messed up, know that they made a sacrifice that they ain't willing to pay, know that for their creature comforts, they made arrangements psychically with entities that are waiting to grab their soul when they move past the brink of death. And some of them are probably even fearful of having to deal with the consequences that they have wrought. Because look, Most of these people, you know why they're so miserable? Is because they don't get a rest. When you and I pass on, we go home, we rest, we get rejuvenated, we find ourselves, we look over our lifetimes and, plan our next moves. These people go, they're gone for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and then they're right back in. They just get the orders. They don't even get time to look over and to consider. That's the real issue. They don't really get to rest. And the few that do, are they hated? Are they hated? But that's the problem for a lot of them. Like I said, I'm not certain that that the wealthy has an escape hatch yet. I'm not certain, because they'd have to get through the rest of the planetary elements that surround them in order to do it, and I'm not sure that they're there yet. Maybe they are. I'm kind of hoping they're not, because they are, they're typically not as smart as they think they are, especially dealing with other entities. And 2, they're destructive everywhere where they go. So that's all I guess I can say about that. Questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. This was a long one, guys. I'm your brother, Mtima Radi. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.